What's up, guys? Hope you guys had a good day. I'm trying to figure out this lighting situation. My room light's not very good. So, yeah. Not sure if this is going to stay on. That'd be annoying. It's alright. We will troubleshoot. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm excited for this one. What's up, Noah? What's up, Jordan? Oh, the man. There he is. What's up, Toma? How we doing? What's up, Sophia? What's up, Nair? Hopefully you guys all had a good day. It was warm today. What's up, Tanish? What's up, Lisa? What's up, Jess? Jacob Tan. Not this week. What's up, Gab? What's up, Kennedy? Tanish, hope you guys doing well. For some reason, my it's not loading right now, but we will. What's up, Dennis? It was warm today. It's kind of actually a little bit glad we had no 4 o'clock grind, because that would have been brutal with the heat. I don't know what's going on. We'll see. I know Lloyd's trying again. What's up, Dennis? Is it going to happen? Or I did it myself, Jacob. Do you like it? I try to cut it as low as possible because it's been very warm. I don't know when I'm actually going to be able to get a real haircut. So yeah, I'd highly recommend, once you guys can, get a haircut. Recommended. Maxwell, what's up, what's up? I'm excited for this one. Thanks, Jacob. Appreciate it. Got some good questions, a lot of stuff. Obviously, for those who don't know, me and Lloyd are good friends. I know a lot about him, but I think it will be. I'm sure I'm going to find out new things I did not know before. So that'll be interesting. What's up, Andrew? Lincoln, welcome. I think my internet or something might be questionable right now, or his. No worries, we got time. So, for those wondering kind of what we're going to talk about, this is the plan. For those who don't know Lloyd played professionally in Europe for a while actually, longer than I played. And then we started coaching together, and now he coaches several top ECNL teams. There he is.
Better late than never.
Yeah, true. Very true. All right, I'm turning off comments. And, dude, how you doing?
Good. It's a little warm. I think you mentioned it's getting up there, so nice to have it cooler, but all good.
For sure. How was the day? You play golf yet at all in the last couple weeks?
I can't say too much because I'm sure customers are on the call, but yeah, playing quite a lot, taking advantage of the off the field activity.
As you should.
Getting worse, by the way, but still having fun.
That's good. That's good. For those who don't know, Lloyd's golf game is actually surprisingly good. I would just put it. He holds it at the club it's the most unorthodox way, but his consistency is pretty good. I'm always impressed when we play. I keep thinking you're gonna be crap, and you keep doing all right. It's
a Happy Gilmore. I think it's a Happy Gilmore with me.
Pretty much. Cool. So let's get started. Let's start. I know obviously a little about your background, but I'm sure I'll learn some things. Give me your background as far as let's start with your playing background, where you grew up and your route as a player.
Grew up in Wales, Cardiff, the capital city, probably 10, 15 miles outside of that.
Where's Wales for people that don't know?
Wales it's part of the UK, but it's connected to England, so it's kind of the left side of England if you look at a map, kind of half the size of England in length. Probably around 3 or 4 million people. Probably a 4-hour drive top to bottom, east to west, probably 3.5 hours west of London. I grew up, so pretty small, very sporting, football, soccer, and rugby, two of the main sports. So grew up just outside Cardiff, the capital city. Played on a village team. Had 2 older brothers who both played football, soccer. So had a kind of guided path from them right from the start. Played in my village team, training once, twice a week, and then you'd often see Cardiff City Scouts, Swansea City Scouts, Bristol City Scouts. So a lot of the professional clubs would bring scouts to watch youth soccer games, basically. Played as a centre forward and kind of got the call when I was around 13, 14, maybe a little younger, 12, 13, from Cardiff City, which were the closest professional club to me, asking would I like to go and join their academy team or the equivalent of the academy team. So I did. I think it was probably 13. So played at Cardiff City.
What did the academy? What did that look like? Like 4 trainings a week? Was it residential or
Yeah,
what?
no, it's kind of what the elite club program is here. So it's up until 16. It's 3 trainings a week in your own age. Non-residential. I think at the time you had to live within 90 minutes of your club, so you couldn't travel super far to play. But it was 3 a week, and the best in that area, basically. So I joined at 13. At 16, it gets a little different. So kind of to give you a good equivalent, it would be the last 3 years of club soccer you would play in one team. So think about maybe like a 16s, 17s, 18s combined team.
Got it.
And you would have anywhere between 6 or 8 players from each age make one roster. So if you were a U16, you probably theoretically wouldn't play as much. And then the second years would play a little bit more. And then the older guys would play a lot. And then at the end of that third year, you basically go into the office of the first team head coach. So the men's team, and they will basically tell you whether or not they'll sign you to a professional contract and you'll move on to train with the first team, or that they say, thanks, but no thanks, and you find another avenue to go down. So I went on that route. I got a 1-year professional deal at Cardiff City, didn't play. And then at the age of 18, moved into the Midlands, so to the kind of middle of England, to play at a club called Shrewsbury Town. Played there for 2 or 3 years, had a little bit of success.
What level is that? And what position
That
do you play?
is it. I played as an outside back, so what I thought, or how I found things were, the better the level, the further back I got from the other team's goal. So started as a centre forward, then played as a number 10, then played as a left winger, and then predominantly spent my career as an attacking outside back. And then that kind of, the level was the third tier. So you had the Premier League, the Championship, and then League One. So good level. You'd get anywhere between 5 and 20,000 people at each game, depending on the club you'd play against. Played there a couple of years, then kind of bounced around a little bit. I think there's a lot of uncertainty at that level, kind of 1-year contracts, kind of not sure where you're going to end up. Went to 2 or 3 other clubs. And in the mid-20s, then decided to move back to Wales, play on a predominantly amateur level in Wales. But the kind of carrot playing in Wales was it was his own league. So if you won the league, you would play in the UEFA Champions League. If you came second, you would play in the Europa League. So it was an avenue to be able to play at the biggest and best level. So I ended up playing probably 8 to 12 games of European football, which, outside of the top 4 in England or top 5 in England, not many people can say. So I kind of took a different route.
Do they still have that?
Mid-20s.
Do they still have that?
Yeah. So we would play, anywhere between Celtic, Liverpool.
You had to win your league in order to do this.
You had to win your league.
How many times did you win league? How many times were you in Champions League?
Twice in the Champions League and the 3 times in the Europa League. Played FC Copenhagen, Anderlecht, Dinamo Tbilisi, some big clubs. So
is that
great
when you
experiences.
Is that when you played that when you had Pogba in your pocket, or what?
No, that was. I mean, the picture doesn't tell the true story. It looks like he was just running around with me under his arm, but he wasn't playing too well. So I kind of just gave him a little confidence and said, "Hey, you have the ball, you can run around." He was playing. I was playing in Wales at the time for the champions of the country, and we played against Manchester United reserves at the time. So there was Pogba played, Jesse Lingard, a lot of the guys that are kind of coming through now. Rashford was around, I think. I was a little older than these guys, so it was probably the first time I'm playing thinking, who are these young guys who are fast and sharp? So kind of, it was a good decision not to try and pursue a higher level when I saw these young guys, for sure.
Yeah. What was so you always played a lot of games. What any most memorable game?
I'd say probably we played a European tie. We played a home game against Dinamo Tbilisi, so it's Georgia, kind of the old South Russia. We played them at home. They were former European champions in the late 80s, early 90s, I think. And we won the game 2-1. We were 2-1 up, and I gave a penalty away. Last 2 or 3 minutes, just tired legs, foot hanging out, and they score the penalty 2-1. And I don't sleep for 3 or 4 nights thinking, hey, I've just ruined the chances.
So it was 2-1 at your place.
It was 2-1 at our place. Yeah,
Okay.
It could have been 2-0. Away goals count for double. We had, I think, maybe 15,000 watching, which was pretty good given the the level. And then went out to Russia or Georgia, and you train the day before the game. You have to train no more than 24 hours. So you go the night before, train at the stadium, and they have an Olympic stadium, so it held, I think, 70,000. And I was in all empty at the time. Obviously, you're just training. And I played some pretty good teams in some pretty good environments, but this was just kind of breathtaking. We go to the field for game day, and I mean, the place is just rocking. The streets are just lined. The bus is swaying. People are kind of rocking the bus. I mean, right from the go, you're kind of thinking, what the hell? What the hell am I getting ourselves into? And then the first time I stepped foot onto the field to go and warm up, it was probably half full. And you could kind of I could feel my throat drop to my stomach thinking, this is for real. And I'll never forget, and I'm left-footed, pretty technically good, not great, but good. And the kickoff play was the ball would come back to me, I'd take a touch and kind of just put it onto the center forward's head. And I was so pumped that the ball came to me and I kicked it out for a goal kick. I've never kicked a ball so far in my life. Ended up losing the game 5-0.
Oh.
I think maybe 61 or 62,000 people were there. I played terribly. I got the run around by some Georgian international player. But just in terms of the whole environment, that's probably the one game that I would never, ever forget.
Very cool. Very cool. So, okay, you're back in Wales. You're playing amateur. How do you end up in America? And then what brings you there, and what are you doing there?
That's a good one. So I had a cousin who lived in Canada. I had a construction business. It was off season. I reached out to him, said, look, I got 4 or 5 weeks spare, thinking of kind of taking a mental break. Can I come and stay with you? So I went out to Canada, played in just an amateur league. I think it was the PDL. I'm sure you're familiar with that. It's kind of a league designed for college guys that come home for the summer.
How old are you at this point? Probably like mid-20s?
Yeah, mid-20s. Yeah, mid-20s. So significantly the oldest there, probably 2 or 3, older players, and the rest are kind of predominantly 18 to 22. I came off the season, so I was pretty sharp and pretty fit. And the level was just okay, but clearly a little ahead of everybody else. And then John Carver, who was the Toronto FC head coach at the time, came to watch a couple of games, invited me to go and train with the MLS club. So I ended up signing a short-term deal. I think it was 6 months at Toronto. So I kind of spent a little bit of time in and around the MLS roster. Stayed there. Obviously, my now wife at the time, girlfriend, fiance, is from Northern California. So I kind of hit a crossroads thinking, where do I go? Do I stay in Canada? Do I go back to the UK and pursue it a little more seriously? And at that time, Sac Republic were forming a roster for their kind of inaugural year. So I think it might have been 2013, 2014. So my agent at the time reached out to the technical director and said, hey, I've got a player. He's interested. He's looking to set up shop in Northern California. That's where his soon-to-be wife is. Are you interested? So they said yes. So I came over. Didn't have to train, but met the head coach, who was Preki at the time, Graham Smith, a younger English guy, technical director. So I kind of decided to make the move to Northern California on the assumption that I would play at Sac Republic. And to cut a long story short, met with the coach 2 or 3 times and didn't get really great vibes from him. So stopped playing right there, right then. Decided life in Northern California was what I wanted. I was okay with not playing soccer anymore. Felt like I'd done enough. I think I was 27. So I stopped playing. And I had a friend who coached at De Anza, and I reached out to him, probably hadn't spoken to him for 5, 10 years, and said, "Hey, I'm here. What do you think I should be doing?" And that brought me down to the Bay Area. Put a session on, I think, a couple sessions on for one of the coaches that's now left, and found myself with 2 teams and living in Fremont in my wife's family house, and
Living the dream.
I've been here since. So definitely a unique path, but I wouldn't change any of it.
Nice. Very cool. So now you're in California, you're coaching. Your first teams was a team that we were on together, yeah? Was that the
Yeah, so I think we were kind of responsible for 4 teams. They couldn't have been. I think they're 2004s now. At the time, they must have been U7 or 8. I mean,
Yeah.
we were playing 7v7 or 8v8. So I know that you had the top 2 teams, and I was the guy who had the other 2 teams who nobody knew and nobody cared about, but was just out there. So yeah, I think we worked. The first team I had, we'd worked together, and it kind of quickly kind of snowballed into something good.
Oh yeah, agreed. I think I mean I was still pretty new actually, coach at that point. I think it was maybe 3 or 4 years in.
Yeah.
But this is I think the one huge takeaway I'd give to any coach is like try to be on the field with other coaches as much as possible. I think it was so valuable to train with you. I think we're training 2 or 3 times a week, and
Yeah.
every session was together, and we did it for like 5 months, and so we're always talking and bouncing ideas off each other. I feel like I learned more in that time, and like it's not just learning; we're learning from each other, but also it makes you just think more and think differently when you're on the field. It's just such a good way to learn.
No, I agree. I think ultimately you want to be in an environment where not necessarily you're being pushed, but I think having someone to bounce ideas off, that person being knowledgeable enough to agree or disagree, I think is kind of the catalyst to your own individual development. I think it's the same as a player too. So I think that environment where you can be comfortable enough to say and think whatever you feel like, I thought was I think important for probably both of us.
Agreed. Okay, so you started with the lower level groups, obviously, as most new coaches come in.
Yeah.
And then now you're obviously coaching the highest level you can coach in youth soccer. What would you give like advice for coaches that are, maybe they're just getting into it and they're kind of maybe like maybe how is it different coaching the silver or copper or whatever versus the top level you can coach at youth? What's the difference in coaching those two? And then also what would you recommend for coaches wanting to coach higher level?
I think you alluded to it, just being on the field as much as you can. It's kind of designed where that's a little more challenging, especially if you coach multiple teams. It maybe doesn't give you the flexibility to do your own training and then go to somebody else's training, or to find that kind of window that you're not on the field yourself and you want to go and see somebody else's training. So that's a challenge. But I think a lot of communication, whether it's, hey, what's your plan, picking up the phone in the morning saying, hey, what are you thinking? I think Zoom now is probably going to be the kind of holy grail for communication from coach to coach, probably prior to training. So I think that's going to be huge for any kind of coach moving forward. In terms of the level, I think one thing I've kind of realized is that you get challenges and hurdles and obstacles at every single level.
For sure.
Every single level. They just change. When I was the kind of coaching on the bronze and silver teams, it was kind of the challenge was, having enough players, keeping the players interested, making sure that they were going to the correct goal. So many things which you think are kind of unbelievably kind of inept things that you've got to be able to teach. And then at the higher level, it's a kind of keeping them on the same recruitment path, keeping them motivated if they get knocked back. So I truly believe that, you have to be adverse to face any challenge, and you don't necessarily lose the challenge as you progress through the levels. It just changes. But to answer your question, I think a lot of time on the field, an open mind, I think is fantastic. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Latch on to mentors. I think that's
Latch on
really
to what?
important. Mentors, having
Mentors,
people that you
mentors.
look up
Yeah.
to and look up to, and you can say, "Hey, I think this. What do you think?" People that you can bounce ideas off. And I also think, I mean, I think it served me well as a player, but I also think just being different. I think, it's a very generic term, a coach, and I think there's more than one way to do it. I think just find what suits you best, and a lot of that is probably down to your characteristics as a person. So be okay being different than something else. I found that as a player. I find that now when players want to make my team, and my kind of angle to the families is maybe, hey, how are you different from what I already have on the team? So whether you're a player trying to make a team or a coach trying to coach a better team, just being the same as someone else is not good enough. You need to do more to be able to replace that player, replace that coach. So I found myself always trying to think differently, challenge myself to a different way of thinking. And I think that shows in my training, and I would say similar to you, just in terms of the interpretation of the game and how we see it.
I think that's a lot of good stuff there. I was going to make one point about coaching, but I think that point about you said about like the player needs to do something that makes when they need to replace the player that's on the field. I think that's an excellent point. I think so many players are like, what am I doing? What do I need to do? What do I need to do? Like, you need to do something that's going to replace the player on the field.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, so many times I get parents maybe on second team saying, hey, my player could play on this team. Well, yes, but probably there's 10 of the players on that player's team who could make my team. But one, I can't have a roster of 30, and two, the player that you wanted to place is already on my team. So if you're not significantly better, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it doesn't make sense to kind of ruffle feathers. And that's a challenge. So, I would recommend that anybody that's trying to make a team, they go beyond that kind of doubt where you are questioning whether or not it's the right move.
Good point. Good point. One thing too, about the coaching piece, about like being on the field, it's huge. I know, like, just to really reiterate and define, be on the field, but be on the field learning. Like, you can't be isolated. You can't be like, oh, I'm on the field for, I'm coaching all these teams. And if you're just in your own world, on your own island, that's not going to help you improve as much as being on the field with another coach, with somebody you can bounce ideas off, talking to them outside of sessions.
No, completely.
Huge.
I mean, you have to have value in what you're doing. Spend your time wisely. And one thing I found is that the best coaches are always willing to share. So I think we're in a time where sometimes, especially social media, has led us to kind of be a little bit closed in what we want to provide. So I think the top coaches, or the top people that can help you, are the ones that are willing to share. And those are really the ones I think you can get most value from.
Good point. Let me see. So, okay. You kind of addressed it, but just to reiterate, when you're looking for what you're looking for in players, it's something that's different. Like, what are they bringing that's different? And like, for me as a coach, give a couple examples for you. What are the things that you look for? That like how kids can or players can like, oh, I have to take a look at this person, or that person interests me.
Anybody that comes into a team, let's say maybe like, there's probably two ways you can go about it. Kind of a generic tryout where everybody's trying to make a place on a team. And then you get the players that, specifically come to your team. Maybe they've been filtered through the club system, and the club have kind of pointed them my way. I'd say there's super generic things like being on time, being dressed in the appropriate clothing. Don't come to a soccer tryout in Golden State Warriors t-shirt and running shorts. I look at what cleats you're wearing. Are you wearing a soccer jersey? Do you have somebody on the back? I mean, I know it sounds dumb, but these are the things that, for me personally, and again, just kind of that different mentality you pick up on. Do you have somebody on the back of your jersey? If you do, for me, that's a sign that you may like the game a little more than someone who's got a jersey. I mean, I know that sounds kind of small, but so from an equipment standpoint, I think just looking appropriate is the first thing.
Don't wear your old club's jersey.
Don't wear your old club's jersey. Don't bring your arch enemy's backpack to the tryout.
Not a good idea.
Not a good idea. That doesn't set the right tone. And then on the field stuff, there's probably three things that I kind of look for. The physicality. the willingness to compete, putting a body on someone. I think that's always a challenge going into a new environment. You're kind of, unsure of how you want to handle yourself. So I think that willingness to be physical is key. I think the communication piece is a non-skilled skill, meaning that you don't have to be skilled to communicate. I think that's something as a new player going into a new environment, whether it's man on time, whatever information you want to give. And I think generally just giving information in general is very appealing to a coach. And I think the one thing from a technical standpoint that I always look for is someone passing the ball firm. I think that's kind of one of the key points for me. If I see someone really zipping the ball into somebody else and testing them, it's one of two things. It makes you look good, and really you're putting somebody else under pressure, and that's kind of by design, because at the end of the day, you want to look good. So I think that kind of speed of pass, it's contagious, and I think that sets a tone. So those three things: physicality, communication, and then kind of the ball speed, the conviction in everything you do. The three kind of pieces, I think, for a player, any kind of player going into a team or a club or a tryout, those are kind of the non-negotiables for me.
How about, what should parent involvement look like with a tryout?
Wishing them good luck, and then closing the door, and that's about it.
So
yeah,
there's no reason to communicate with the coach or anything, because I just want to make sure.
It's a little like age appropriate, right? For a player that you feel like can handle their own conversation. I think it's the parent role is basically irrelevant. And obviously, the younger they are, they may need a little bit of guidance, but I don't think that the parents' involvement should be anything in terms of how they market their own player, or not be okay with whatever the club decides to do. So an open mind from a parental standpoint is good. And really, I think one of the things we kind of get in this country, we kind of get lost in is, are you wanting to come to a team or are you wanting to come to a club? And the club should always be the selling point, not a team or a coach, because that will change. And the club will kind of consistently be the same. So I think it's a club-driven process with good players and good staff versus trying to get on a team or go with somewhere else. And I find that, I'll have players who would rather be on a top team at a non-ECNL or non-academy team than be on a second team at, say, a Thorns or a Dianza, but with the potential to move up. They would rather be on the first team than a second team with the ability to move up. So I would say, look at the bigger picture. What's your end goal? Maybe not the goal of where you're at right now.
I think that's huge. Yeah, club over team is a big mindset. I think it's tough for players to get through to, especially parents. Okay, so we've been talking a little bit about tryouts, what you look for. How do you see COVID affecting tryouts?
That's hard to say. I would just encourage, and I think I alluded to Zoom, but I think all you can do, I think from a time standpoint, it's really tough to put a point on when we're going to be on the field. I think, again, it's a little bit age appropriate. Younger ages, maybe 99, 77, it's generic. Everything should revolve around the ability to send videos. So kind of quarantine videos, home videos. I know you do a lot of workouts for the players and kind of that individual piece. So I think that's the measuring stick for younger ages. The ability to dribble and pass, kind of the principles: dribble, pass, turn. And I think at the more complex ages, I think, trying to make things as much positional as you can, record everything. So you should be sending videos, basically, taking the ball out of the air, hitting the balls over a larger distance with both feet, and trying to make the videos as specific as possible to your position. So I think you've really got to kind of put yourself in a situation where it's not super generic, where it's you and a ball or you and a wall, because I guess that's all you can get from this kind of moment. But again, you got to go and try and be different. So I think it's consistency and kind of just doing above and beyond. So I think quarantine videos, homework videos of you playing at home, but make it more complex. Maybe it's receiving a ball from 20, 30 yards. Maybe it's hitting the ball both feet, whether it's, maybe it's a hard dribble and a play inside if you're an outside back, and really think about how, probably come up with 2 or 3 principles that you find yourself during the game in your position
One
and
second.
try and
Motion sensor went off. All right, all good.
yeah, just try and replicate what you would do in the game and see if you can replicate that in a video as such versus, you know, going through 5 cones, dribbling and turning. But I mean, that's all you can do. I think putting yourself in a position through video during this time is really all you can do. But trying to make it positional is probably the key.
Got it. What do you think about? Are you good over there?
Yeah, just my crazy daughter.
What do you think about, like, what should kids that are looking to try out be doing right now? Should they be looking to film videos, or do you think they should be working more on, like, continue to prepare themselves so when they get the opportunity to be back on the field, they can, you know, put their best foot forward, or both?
Both,
Yeah.
both for sure. I mean, I'm sure they got a ton of time. Every club is different. Our club does a good job of recording games, so creating highlight videos or game film of some sort. And that's a kind of another conversation for itself in terms of the construction of maybe a highlight video. But highlight videos are awesome. It's all we can kind of gauge on. If you're not a club which, you know, consistently films games, then it's going into your backyard or going with your mum or your dad or your sibling over to the field and just trying to recreate moments in the game that we can relate to versus that kind of ball in the wall. And that's really all you can do.
Okay. I have this question from a few players. How, as you a coach, how do you view players that have tried out, like that try out for a lot of teams, or maybe like they maybe bounce around to clubs? How do you feel as a coach, like when you're making decisions on players? What's your thoughts on someone like that?
It's a red flag. Again, in terms of the player wanting to come in or the parent wanted the player to come in, it's a cultural thing, and the club is the kind of core of the culture. So the player being a good fit onto the team, it isn't enough. For me personally, it isn't enough. You have to value the player more. You have to value the player off the field more. The parent's going to be more of a headache than a help. So it's kind of a wider scope of player attitude off the field, how you are going to project the family to integrate with other families. I mean, so it's a really complex situation, especially at the higher levels, to keep the balance right. I think boys and girls are slightly different too. I think the boys are maybe more willing to just get on with somebody if they're good. And I think with the girls, I think the girls have it better off in terms of, you know, the appropriate kind of team dynamic. They have to be a good fit. But to answer your question, it's a big red flag for me if players have bounced around between clubs, because what's the common denominator? Is it the clubs or the players?
Very true.
And the clubs are changing, but the player seems to stay.
How would you define bouncing around? Like, is it like, you know, every season or every like 2 years? Like, what would you say?
I would say it's maybe I wouldn't
Or
put
just
a
a
time frame
spectrum?
on it. I wouldn't put a time frame on it. I would put it probably inappropriate to the level. So let's say a player goes to play on an ECNL team, and in the space of 12 months they play on 3 ECNL teams. They're not really in it for the higher level. They're in it because they're not happy and probably would rather blame the club than their own individual kind of performance. So it's maybe not a time frame thing or a number of teams, because if you kind of fast track yourself through, you know, Premier, NPL, and find yourself on an ECNL team, then that's a good trajectory to take. But if you are going to go from an NPL team to an NPL team to an NPL team, then for me, that's kind of where the red flag comes in. So I think it's more of a correlation between, is the level keeping you up on the upslope, or are you moving because you would rather blame situational circumstances than the player? So for me, it would be the level. If the level's continuing to improve, then I'm fine with somebody bouncing around. It's that kind of unsettling. Well, the team's not good enough, or she's playing out of position. I mean, if those are the kind of the sources, then that's another conversation as well. But I would put it down to playing level. If they continue to improve the level that they're playing at, I don't see an issue. But if you get the perennial kind of club hoppers at the similar level, then you're going to run out of clubs.
Yeah, yeah. What would you say to the player who's, you know, pretty loyal? They've been with the group for a couple years, and they feel like they're one of the top players in that group, but they're not on the top team yet, and they're not yet getting a shot. Because I know a lot of clubs, like, it's tough to work into that top team, and honestly, like, a lot of times, sometimes players get lost in the shuffle. It can happen, especially the lower level teams. What would you say to those players, the ones where it's like, I'm on the second team or the third team, and I feel like I'm one of the best players at training, but I'm not being pushed? Like, what's the steps for them?
I think that's a good question, and it happens way too often. I would encourage the player to take a lot of responsibility on themselves and speak with the coaches on the team above. I have an example on the 04s, my 04 ECNL team, where I dropped a player down, and she almost bugged me so much to come and train, come and watch the game, to be included in Team Snap, to be included here. It was almost better to just, or easier for me to have her on the team, and now she's a starting player. So I think proactiveness, and it's a player-driven process, just kind of like the college piece. But I encourage the player to be proactive, whether it's asking for IDPs, an individual plan.
Okay.
It's an individual plan that whether it's her current coach or the coach above would like to see over a period of time, maybe 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. But I definitely think a player-driven process to get the chance to have exposure to the team above is it's only fair, and it should be the way that the club is designed to go. Doesn't happen all the time. But that's how it should go. But again, I think it's really important to kind of note it's a player-driven process. Once the parent gets involved, then again, it's that red flag.
I like that. But I'm thinking just as perspective, if I'm the second team coach and the coach jumps me and talks to the coach above me, like,
yeah, I mean, it's a process. I mean,
what's the process look like? Would you say?
The process is going to your current coach, creating a plan of some sort, or asking for some constructive feedback, taking that, giving themselves a timeline to revisit the conversation, and if they don't feel like anything's improved, then I think it's fair to kind of go over the head of your current coach. You've paid your dues in terms of speaking to your coach and getting some constructive guidance or feedback. So I think it's fair then to kind of jump over the head. I agree with you. You shouldn't just go straight over the head of your current coach. But ultimately, we're denying a player a chance to be seen, and that shouldn't happen at any level. So there is a process. Process is do a good job. If you're not getting what you want, go to your current coach, come up with something collectively. I think the parents' involvement is not needed, but then being aware of what the actual plan looks like, I think is important, so they can have a measuring piece to it, and then setting a time frame, revisiting it, and then if there's no development or growth, then I think it's fine for the player to go over the head of the coach to go to the coach above.
Okay, makes sense. What about for the players who maybe play on clubs that don't have as organized a structure with IDPs and stuff? What are they asking their coach for? Like, so that if they go and ask what an IDP is, and the coach is like, "Get better," like what specifically they should be asking their coach to set them in the best spot going forward?
I think kind of figuring out what your end goal is first in terms of where you want to be. What does that mean? It means, if you want to play on an ECNL or an academy team and that's your end goal, kind of logistically figuring out where you are, asking your coach what the next step is. Theoretically, you may or may not outgrow that club. So that kind of, when we speak about that kind of hopping around, so let's say you play at a smaller club where the top team is the equivalent to a bigger club's second or third team, you may very well outgrow the club from a personal standpoint. So I think if it's not an individual plan, I think just going to your coach and asking what you can do to get better is the first piece. I think that's very generic, and they'll say something like, do something, and then you kind of really don't really know what they're saying. I think that's a vague, generic kind of process. But in those moments, I think you've got to look to see, right? So it goes back to the club thing. If the club is not structured in a way which you don't feel like it can help you, then you're probably in the wrong club. So I don't encourage people to just go everywhere, but go into your coach, ask him what you can do better, where they see you playing in a year's time or 2 years' time, setting short-term, medium goals, and long-term goals. I think is important. Making those goals realistic, and those are kind of short-term steps I think you can use. But that's a tough question. That's a tough question because it's every club is different, every coach is different, and that's a hard situation.
But basically trying to find honest feedback that you can now have a measuring stick for what you need to improve to get to that next level.
Yeah, and maybe it's you go and watch a different club play at the level that you think you should be at, and that maybe readjust what your goal is. So I think gathering as much information within your club and maybe looking at the top club in the area at that level as well is a good measuring stick to figure out if your expectations are aligned with your playing level.
Good stuff. You kind of went over it, but what would you say for players that want to play at the highest level? Like, what are the things they should be focusing on? Anything specific or a couple things?
I think that's a good question because we've both worked with top teams and second teams, and I think we have similar kind of thought processes. And if you branch the player into four pillars, so we'll go through maybe the tactical, the physical, and the mental piece. I don't think there's alarmingly anything drastic which you would get from a top player than a second team player. I just think there's an accumulation of small things which end up having a bigger impact. So let's say technically, I don't think necessarily there's a huge technical jump sometimes between first and second team players, but maybe the range between what their best is and their worst is smaller at the higher level than it is on a second team. So the consistency in their technique at a top player's level would be, more profound than it would be for a second team. For the tactical piece, that's a coach by coach kind of concept. So I don't think a first team player somewhere kind of has a ton more tactical insight than the second team. So I think that's kind of here or there. But I think the two off the ball kind of concepts of the mentality and the physicality are probably the bigger two in terms of the bridge to gap to go from a second team to a first team. So there's a slight difference in physicality, touch stronger, touch faster, touch more mobile. And then the mentality is probably the best thing. Just the competitiveness, the willingness to bring it every time you put your shoes on. There's just that kind of internal drive, the kind of intrinsic thoughts that these players have at the higher levels. So I wouldn't say there's one thing which jumps out, but there's a combination of little things which I think end up having a bigger impact than you'd think. The game is at that level, the game is pretty marginal. I find that the higher level you go, the smaller the difference, the more beneficial it is, and probably the bigger it becomes. It's not like the first team player can trap the ball and the second team player can't. It's now the smaller details. Can they trap it and go this way? Can they receive it and protect it? Are they strong enough to shield it? I mean, so it's a combination of what I would call the four pillars of a soccer player. And the top level players just do it a little better. And I think the key thing is just having that desire to be better. If your mentality is right, you can be technically better. If your mentality is right, you can be tactically better. If your mentality is right, you can be more physical. So I think the mentality is probably the most undercoached of the four, and ultimately the most important. Because I get it all the time where people tell me that this player is technical, and I'm kind of like, what does that mean? What does technical mean? I mean, it's most of the game's played off the ball, right? So do you understand it? Can you cover the ground? It's way more bigger than the ability to trap and pass.
Okay, now the $10 million question is, how do you improve your mentality?
I wish I knew. No, I think it's some of it's probably not coachable. I think some of it's kind of an internal drive, but I think setting goals is good. Visualization, the mental piece, setting reminders on your phone in terms of just even if it's the small things like today, I'm going to go out and make sure I compete as hard as I can. every single play, every single time I touch the ball. I mean, it's a slow burner. I don't think you improve it, overnight. But I think if you have a desire to improve and you mean it, the problem is it's a really easy thing to be saying, and it's a really hard thing to see improvement. But I think that desire to just get better every single time you go out in the field um, is the key. And I think if I kind of rank my best players in terms of 1 to 16, 1 to 18, it's not far off just being the most mentally prepared and competitive and tough and combative. And it's a correlation. It's a correlation between the output and the mentality. So I just think a desire to get better is probably the most important thing.
Very good stuff. I agree wholeheartedly. How about we spend a lot of time talking about players now. Any last piece of advice you give to a coach that wants to coach at a high level?
See the game different. I mean, I'm starting to do a lot more coaching education within our club, and I think one of the things I kind of liken, I'll give you a good example. We speak a lot about, pattern play versus decision making. And again, we can relate this down to an individual level, right? If you were going to bounce the ball off the wall, it's going to come back. And the next thing then is to go through the 3 cones. So it's a hard thing to not be a part of in the current environment we're in. But I would say if we translate that kind of that pattern play mentality versus a decision making or a kind of problem solving, I think from a coaching standpoint, the core of your coaching needs to be the problem solving and the decision making. So the game is actually the teacher. I liken pattern play to like a dance routine. So pattern play being the ball goes to this player, then it goes to this player, then it goes to this player. This player is going to run down the end line, put the ball into the box, and these 3 people are going to run in these 3 directions, and you're going to score. It's like a dance routine.
It's like American football. It's here's a set play, and this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, and there's no adjustment, there's no problem solving. We don't change our decision based what's in front of us. Where the decision making piece you can create or manipulate in your trainings, which is way more relatable to the game, where you have to see and perceive and understand, and what you see affects your decision, and every decision is different. So I think for coaches, one of my biggest kind of tips is if you want to kind of create a training session, for example, the game is the biggest teaching point, and then you scale back from the game. You don't start at nothing and then build it out to focus on something. You look at the game and scale it back, and then if it needs to be scaled back again, you bring it again. If it needs to be scaled to the left to focus on your 11 and your 10 and your 5, it goes to the left. So the game is the teacher. The game will teach you everything. If you work from one player to a goal, then everything else is kind of more of a manipulation of a pattern or an idea. So I think it's really key that coaches look at the game and then come up with creative ways, whether it's recovery runs, whether it's a transition moment, just something which makes it a little bit more challenging for the players to have to solve a problem. So I think the game is the teacher, and if you can encourage decision making and problem solving, you're onto a winner. Versus where you've given them a predetermined outcome, and that outcome is the same over and over and over again. We both played. I played for 20 years, and I never was in the same situation twice. But yet we're okay telling the players, the ball goes there, the ball goes there, the ball goes there. Oh, okay, let's do the other side. The ball goes there, the ball goes there. So I think the game will teach you, and take smaller pieces of the game and use that as the core of your training.
That sounds like a very familiar topic to players. Like you were saying, for players that want to train, don't just go and dribble through cones or pass off a wall. Think put yourself in game realistic situations as much as you can.
Yeah, I mean, if I watch a player go through 5 cones, I'm thinking, where's the reality? In my mind, I relate that to 5 defenders standing in a line and you go through them and then dribble. So all you need to do is go through one, figure out if you're going to go slow to the cone and then push it fast. And then maybe you're going to turn to the right because the next defender's coming here, or to the left because the defender's there. So everything you do, you have to take a step back and think, hey, could I see this happening on the field during a game? And if the answer is yes, you're going to get something from it. If the answer is no, then
completely agree. That's why one of the things when we do the Mogility stuff, I try. Okay, if we do a little bit of warm up with just the homework, okay, but like the majority of the session needs to be game specific, because that's what we're trying to improve. We're not trying to
but then
become
it goes,
street
but
performers.
it's almost tied into the mentality, right? So then you get it, and then the mentality is to do it better, do it faster,
Yes,
make it more realistic, more details. So it's a combination. I think the mentality is the core component to it all, and then making it as realistic to the game as you can. And just think about it. I mean, like, we've all been in situations where the game just throws you curveballs. And I think sometimes we make it too functional. We are too predictable in what we do. Kind of like a good example from a training. If you're going to do a 2v2 where the two players are here and the other two are there, and the ball comes, nobody's going to pass me the ball and then have me dribble towards the player that passed me the ball.
Yeah.
So, is that a situation that you want to kind of replicate? No. Well, okay, if I'm going to go and dribble someone in front of me, I'm probably going to receive it from somewhere else other than in front of me. So that's another thing that you can relate to, which is going to be way more game realistic than fabricated. So just always go back to the game, whether you're a player trying to work on your individual skills, or your coach, whether you're coaching a team or you kind of part of a group session. The game is going to be the teacher, and you've always got to step back and say, hey, can I see that scenario in the game? And if you can, keep doing it.
Good stuff. I like it. Well, that's pretty much, I think, all that I can think of. Anything else you think that would be relevant for maybe a coach who's trying to, coach at a higher level? Maybe. How about lastly, what's like life, maybe coaching life like as like a club coach, right? Like, you tell me, like, I mean, obviously I know it's as well, but I'd like to hear a different perspective. I think a lot of people think it's just like, oh, we just hang out all day, and then like, give me the pluses and minuses maybe real quick of being a club coach.
Well, I have a wife and child now, so the nights away from those two are good. No, I think it's a very unique lifestyle. Predominantly, it's obviously a night driven job, weekend, so it's kind of the polar opposite of a 9 to 5. That has its challenges for sure. Logistically, weekends can be challenging, and I think going to kind of your point, the best coaches, it kind of almost consumes you, to where you were planning consistently, reaching out to other coaches. I know some coaches who would maybe think of a session on the way to the training field in their car, and it shows. So I think, an average day is probably 3 or 4 hours of planning and communicating and kind of bringing in outside knowledge and outside resources, whether it's, reading a book or reading a kind of game analysis from a professional team, and then putting that together to create a training platform for maybe a week or 2 weeks. So it's a lot of time, unique hours. You're never off the clock. I'd say that's probably the more challenging thing is, I'll receive an email or a phone call every single day, 365. Maybe Christmas is the odd exception, but it's a job which is you don't clock in and out. And the best coaches, it kind of consumes them, maybe to a fault. I definitely need to do a better job of kind of setting boundaries of, okay, after 10 o'clock, I don't, or before 6 a.m., I don't respond to an email. It's a full-time job, but if you truly want what's best for the players, and you're asking them for everything once they step foot on the training field or the game, then I feel like you're a bit of a hypocrite if you're not willing to do everything you can for the players. So it's probably the most underwhelming on the outside but rewarding job you could get, and I wouldn't change it. But it's not easy. It's not for everybody. Especially if you coach multiple teams. That's a challenge. But way more positives than negatives. I get to work with some of the best girls in the country, have the best time. You work with some of the best players. And I don't even think it has to be good players, just good people, good kids, good families. I've met some lifelong friends through soccer, whether it's players now that have graduated or families that I've kind of become close with. So way more positives than negatives, but it's a job I think can last a lifetime. and I encourage as many people. I mean, look, I can't speak for you, but I never got this until I was probably 16 years of age. Never got this level of coaching. So I think we need more coaches coming through these kind of systems, because you just ultimately it's a lot of content which is going to waste if we're not kind of revolving the wheel, and these girls and these boys are not getting back involved and giving back to the players. I think that's key.
Agreed. Good stuff. I like it. Lloyd, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
It's been a long time. I haven't seen you for a long time.
Wow, I haven't seen freaking anybody in a long time.
That's true. Are you still working out?
No, I'm just doing the 4 o'clock grind 3 days a week. Thankfully, that's it.
Grind.
I haven't touched a weight in like literally 3 months.
It shows. You're getting a little small.
Well, I'm trying to actually get a little smaller. I want to be more functional. I feel like I was getting too big. I was like too top yet. I was just too big. I'm like, I don't want to be
sounds like a terrible problem.
I know. You know all about that.
I can give you the guidance. If you want just do nothing and eat and drink pretty poorly, and that'll do that.
How's that Peloton life? You still on that?
I'm still on it. Yeah, novelties wore off a little bit, but I'm trying to get on it. A couple of the girls that I coach have it too, so
oh, gosh.
we're friends. So I kind of make sure that I beat them. That's the first objective.
That's right.
And then I monitor them as well. So no, it's we got it at the right time, because obviously activity is challenging, and I think I got it in January, so it's been a blessing in disguise. Especially when you're cooped up all day, it's a good way to get some energy out.
Nice. Cool. Well, glad things are going well. I look forward to seeing you in person in the near future. And yeah.
I think for me, like you were touching on it. Anybody, I mean, feel free to share my information for any kind of coach or player, and anything I can do, whether it's guidance or just an opinion or a second view. More than happy to help. Yeah.
Again, I think that was a big point. Feel free, coaches, to reach out to other coaches, especially the higher level coach, unless they're so high level, they're just so busy. Yeah, because I get reached out to pretty regularly, but absolutely it's a great resource to have and I reach out to other coaches regularly too, just to, bounce ideas off each other.
For sure.
So cool. All right, Lloyd, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys.
And say hi to the missus, and I'll talk to you later.
I will.
All right. See ya.
Bye.